I'm going to be making a pizza dough recipe. The ingredients we require for this are 800 grams of strong bread flour, 500 ml of water, 2 grams of yeast, 2 grams of salt, and 10 ml of olive oil. The first thing we need to do is to add a little bit of water to the yeast and the remaining water into the bowl. Now we're going to add the salt to the water. And what we're doing here, we're going to try to dissolve, or we are going to dissolve the yeast in the water first before we add it to the water with the salt. So I'm going to swirl that round, moving the yeast and the water together so they'll start to melt and emulsify slightly. Okay, whilst that's starting to melt, I'm going to put my hands in the water and I'm going to dissolve the salt. And the reason for this is to get an even distribution of the salt through the dough, and likewise with yeast. The reason why I've not added the salt and yeast together is because the salt will attack the yeast and kill it. Now that's almost dissolved. The next thing I'm going to do is add the olive oil to the water. And now I'm going to add the yeast. Going to mix that all together, and I'm going to start adding the flour. We're going to add a little bit at a time. It's a lot more easier to manage rather than pouring all the flour in and then trying to mix all the other wet liquids into the flour. And you'll see in a moment that this thing will start to come together. Cleaning the side of the bowl. And now we're going to add the remaining flour. And using a sort of a kneading method now, incorporating the remaining flour into the mixture. Now once you feel you can't absorb the rest of the flour, then this is time to place it onto your work surface. Scrape out the dough that's stuck to the side of the bowl. There you have it. And now we're going to knead. And the kneading process is very simple. It literally is using the heel of your hand by pressing down, then the tips of your fingers by drawing the dough back over itself. Pushing down with the heel, drawing back over. Down with the heel and over. And you'll continue this method until we've formed the dough. Now the dough kneading part generally takes about 10 minutes. Because as you'll see, the dough will change its texture as you knead. So I'm going to continue with this now for the next 10 minutes. Now I've been going for about 5 minutes. You will see that the texture of the dough has changed. There you go. Look at that forming into a ball here. We're almost getting like a silky surface to the top, but the test that we need to look for is like the window test, and where you can stretch the dough and create a very fine membrane without it breaking. Now you can see it's breaking here, and this indicates that the dough is not quite ready. So we need to continue kneading for another 5 minutes in my book until the dough is properly formed. Okay, I've been going for about 10 minutes now, and I feel the dough is ready. There are two indicators for me. The first one I mentioned to you was the window pane effect. Now I'm not sure you can see that, but I can stretch the dough until it becomes a really fine membrane, and I almost can see my fingers through it. The other one is when I roll my dough into a ball by cupping my hands, getting underneath the dough and pulling it back towards me, and sliding it across the surface, I can tighten the dough ball and you can get a beautiful silky finish over the top. Okay, the next thing that we need to do now is to rest the dough for an hour. Now, I failed to mention earlier that the quantities that I gave are for 5 portions. The ball sizes are 250 grams per ball. Now, and of course, you could knead your dough in a machine with a dough hook at a sort of low to medium speed for a similar period, but I think it's a great workout. So the next thing we need to do is to put the dough back into the same bowl that we mixed it in the first place. Now we're going to take some cling film, place that over the top, and also I'm going to be placing a damp cloth over that as well. Now that's going to be placed to one side in a room at room temperature for about 1 hour. Place it onto our work surface. And the next thing we need to do is to weigh the dough ball itself to ensure that we can divide it correctly. Yeah, there we are. We got 1 kilo 250 grams. And what we're going to do here now is to divide the dough ball into 5. We're looking for 250 gram dough balls. Okay. There's one. So the next thing we need to do is to form the dough into balls. And the way we do that is by cupping our hands over the top and then rolling it into a circular motion until you form a lovely ball like so. Once again, cup over the top and pressing down slightly, and then easing the weight of your hand and then rolling in circle motion to create yourself a dough ball. Now the next thing we need to do is to place them into a container. Now you could use a roasting tray and then tightly cling film it, or in this case I'm going to be using a container like this which has its own lid. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to dust the base with some flour and then place the dough ball into the 4 corners of the container. This is allowing space in between each one for the dough to prove and to expand. And once again, we're going to add a little bit more flour on top of the dough. So we're going to place the lid on and seal. And I'm going to a little smaller container here for this 5th one, so that can go on top of there. A little bit more flour and a lid. Okay. Now this needs to prove now between 6 and 8 hours. Now to remove the dough out of here, and what you don't want to do is to disturb the carbon dioxide that's been created to allow the dough to rise. So it's important that we get this out of the container in a gentle fashion. I'm putting some flour down the creases, so when I lift the dough, it'll come out more easily. So what we're going to do here, we're going to just push it down. Like so, and then in between here as well. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to slide my scraper underneath. Just got to release the sides as well. And there you got it. There's my dough. So I'm going to place that away from me. Now I'm going to add a bit of flour on the surface. Going to place the dough on that, and now you can see it's aerated. So what I'm going to do now is going to use my fingers in the center, and I'm going to start to work outwards, creating a circular disc. But I don't want to go right up to the edge and flatten it. I just want to keep a crust shape. All the way around. I'm going to add a little bit of flour on top of that. I'm going to stretch it. And as you can see, I don't need a rolling pin to work this dough. I just need my fingers to work the dough outwards. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to pick up the dough into my hands, and I'm going to use my fingers just to spread it by stretching the dough, and this will allow me to extend the surface area but not affecting the crust where I've got a little bit more dough in those areas. Now as you can see, it's starting to widen out. And once again, get my hands in there and help me to stretch it. Now I'm going to try to stretch it to about 28 centimeters, which will fit my pizza tray, which I've got here. So we're almost there. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to add a bit of olive oil onto my tray. There you go. Taking a brush, and I'm going to spread that all over. This is just to prevent it from sticking. And some people will want to cook their pizza base straight onto a stone in the oven which has been preheated, but I don't have that, so I'm just using a tray like this. You can use a square tray, oblong tray. As long as it's big enough to take the dough itself, it'll be fine. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to have one final stretch, and then I'm going to place this onto my tray, and I'm going to push it up towards the edge. Okay. There you go. There we are. So we've got the edge of the dough, which has a thicker outside and a thin base, which will allow it to cook a lot quicker. Now we're going to be wanting to put the topping on. And there you have it. Out of the oven, been cooking for about 20 minutes at 200 degrees centigrade in a fan assisted oven. What we're looking for is a beautiful crispy crust. If you can hear this. There you go. And a brown bottom, so it's not wet or soggy. And all I need to do now is to cut it into 4 using my pizza cutter here. And look at this beautiful crust, nice and soft with a crispy outside. Well, I hope you enjoy making it as much as I have. There you are.